Hi folks, Chris Schmidt, Key West Makers. This weekend is going to be a great weekend for you because this is the weekend you get your garage, your workshop, your crafting area organized. I'm going to show you 4 very simple sort of wall hanging techniques that you can reuse over and over again to declutter that workspace of yours. And what's more, you don't need very expensive tools to do this. I'm going to use my table saw, my drill press, and probably even my bandsaw, but the fact is you could use a jigsaw and an electric drill to get most of this done. Probably the simplest holders that I have are just dowels screwed into a piece of wood, and I use these over and over again in my shop. You can see I've got these bench dogs hanging up on one, got this hammer hanging up on one. Let's use these scissors as an example. I have a hardwood dowel. This is oak that I picked up at the big box store, and I have a scrap 1/2-inch plywood. So let's place the scissors on here where we want it to hang. And I like to trace this out because when the scissors go missing, it reminds me of what is supposed to be here. If you don't like that look, just use pencil, you can get rid of it. And I have a 3/8 inch dowel. I'm going to take my 3/8 inch bit, and I like to use these brad point bits so that the tip doesn't wander. Get an idea of how long we want that dowel to be. For quickness sake, I'm just going to use my chop saw, but you could certainly use a jigsaw for this. My scrap piece here is a little bit bigger than I need for the scissors. You could get all cool and cut this out with your jigsaw or your bandsaw if you want, actually to the size of the scissors. I'm just going to cut it into a rectangle, slightly larger than the scissors on my table saw and my chop saw. Now for the French cleat system I'm going to show you a little bit later, you would want to mount some piece of wood with a 45-degree bevel on the back of this, and that's how this is going to hang on the wall or on the French cleat system. And then I would put those screws in from the back here. You'll never see them. But I actually want to screw this directly into my wood wall, so I'm going to put the holes in the front, and I'm going to countersink them with this countersink bit. Little wood glue. And technique number 2, still keeping it super simple, 2 stacked pieces of plywood, such as these hangers right here. This technique works really well with flat things, especially things that you want held horizontally on the wall. You can see a few more items here I've used with this method. Now the holders I have on the wall back here are just 2 pieces, the front piece and the spacer. But if you want to use this with a French cleat system, you'll probably want a back piece. So you're going to have the spacer sandwiched between the front and the back. I'm going to show you how to make the 3-piece system. Let's make ourselves a little holder for this square. 3/4 inch is just a little bit thicker than the thickest part of the square, so I think this is going to work perfectly. All you really need is some wood glue to hold these 3 pieces together, but if you want to use them right away, if you're as impatient as I am, you probably want to screw them together. So I'm going to put countersink holes in the front and the back piece to screw them to the sandwich piece. Couple of holes in the back here now to mount it to the wall. We can take that same concept one step further and turn that sandwich piece. Now we can take that same concept one step further, turn that sandwich piece horizontally and make something like this tape measure holder or iPhone holder. And I'll show you real quickly how I made this. Now the next tool holder is going to get a little bit more advanced, and it's one of my favorite techniques for tool holders. But before we do that, I just want to run through a couple of my overall organization tips. Starting place. Find those collection points, the flat surfaces where everything seems to accumulate in your shop or your workspace. Put everything away that has a place. Don't force it. If it doesn't really have a place, don't just throw it in a drawer, leave it out. And then what's left there, those are the things that we need to find places for. And those are probably good candidates for making a wall holder for. Number 2, define and label your areas. These shelves used to be completely disorganized and disheveled, but I put labels on here with what should be stored in each place, and since then, it's been quite organized. This metal tin used to be a catch-all for anything that didn't have a home. Since I defined that gloves go in there, now I know that there are always gloves in there and only gloves in there. I've also labeled all of my wall storage areas. For example, there is a pegboard over here labeled renovation and plumbing. And although I actually own a fairly fancy labeling system, what I find myself reaching for time and time again is gaffer's tape, magic marker, scissors. You can see that I've used this method for labeling all of my storage bins. Speaking of which, tip number 3, pick some storage bins, stick with them. I use 3 different brands. I use these cheap Plano containers for things I don't use very often. I use the Sortimo for all of my woodworking hardware. And I use the Tano Systainers for all of my tools. Tip number 4, determine a standard size shop cabinet, at least a standard height and a standard depth that you can use to put all your storage containers and your tools in. That way you can use that as a modular system, sort of move them around as you need them. Speaking of modular systems, tip number 5, determine a standard size for your wall panels. Doesn't matter if we're talking about just pieces of plywood that you're going to screw your tool holders to, or if you're using pegboard, or if you're using a French cleat system. This way you can actually move those panels around till you get your shop exactly like you want it. And now back to the actual woodworking. And as I said, this is a little bit more advanced than what we just did, but it's really just a riff on that. You could use this for screwdrivers, really just about anything that, any sort of slim vertical tool with a handle. What this really is one piece of bread on the back, a number of small pieces of meat glued to that, and another piece of bread on the front. And I love these things. Absolutely love them. Love them. Let's go make one. I've cut a couple pieces of plywood here to the same width on my table saw. On one of these, which I'll use for the back piece, I just want to mark out sort of where I want these and how much space I want between them. Next chisel here, space. Next chisel here, space. If you want, all you really need to do is glue this together, clamp it, give it a couple of hours, and this will hold in place. But I'm impatient and I want to start using this immediately. I could use a brad nailer to hold this all together while it's gluing and use it immediately. But I said I was going to keep this simple, so I'm just going to use drill and screws. There we go. We're just going to go trim this off on the chop saw. And that leaves just one more technique I want to show you today, and that's just mounting some pieces of wood perpendicular to the back plate. It can be fairly simple, like this clamp holder. Can be a little bit more tricky with this. This required a bandsaw. Or a little bit more ornate like this, where I actually used a Forstner bit to cut out these circles, and then my bandsaw or my jigsaw just to cut those circles through. And you can see them here used side by side with some dowels. But I also use them up here on my very heavy bar clamps. I like the end to have this little 45-degree angle just for visual. Mount this on here about where you want it. Look at the center and mark that. Give ourselves 2 positions for screws. Again, I'm going to use my countersink, but this time I am not going to go up to the countersink. I just want to make a hole through. Then I'm going to go to the back side, find my 2 holes that I drilled, and countersink. One more thing. I'm going to make these holes a little bit larger. I'm going to put 1 screw in. Make sure that I am square. Put the other screw in. Probably want to put a couple countersink holes for mounting, and there you have a nice little clamp rack. Hopefully you found some ideas that you can use in your shop to get yourself organized. I tried to keep this one super simple, really basic techniques. I have a part 2 coming up, which is a bit more advanced. And I'll also step you through making a French cleat system like this in that video, so watch for that. I recommend hitting the subscribe button and the little notify next to it, and you'll get notified when that video comes out. Also take a look at the video I made about putting together this small parts organizer. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments about any tool holder ideas you have using these methods, other methods you might have, or questions you might have about how to mount a particular tool on the wall. That's all for today, folks. Chris Schmidt signing out from Key West.